Chapter 4.
A walk through the garden. The thing about reality that so many people miss out on is that based on the immediate one they tend to see around them, usually that one isn't based on absolute truth. The senses themselves cannot see the ends of all ends, and they almost never define everything that reality could be in all its splendor. This was a quote that Chili Sue had once heard. She couldn't remember where she had heard it, but she kept repeating it in her mind to give her comfort. It was the only reasoning she could think of that gave her solace as to how her being alive right now was possible. The last thing Chili Sue had remembered was walking into a wall of cloud by the base of what she thought was Mount Muhadeu. Then she remembered having several grisly dreams. They had to be dreams. The first part involved some sort of strange battle going on by a beach. The sky was an avocado green and the clouds were sinister and surreal looking. She saw herself fending off a swarm of terrible-looking monsters with monstrous mouths all over their vine-like bodies, while a group of humans surrounding were defending themselves from the onslaught. It was terrifying. Some of her human allies looked like they were about to succumb to exhaustion, but one particular individual there stood above the rest and caught her gaze in the dream. It was a young black woman with long wavy hair and a pink hijab scarf wrapped around her head. She distinctly remembered how imposing she was, all clad in leather chaps and armored weaponry at the same time. The young woman's eyes met Chili's, and telepathically, she could just communicate with her. "None of this threat you felt is fundamentally real," said the woman. "The weapon against you is believing it all is." Bam! One of the individuals defending alongside Chili went flying across her, and the next thing Chili felt was getting hit by something from behind and falling into deep water she could not get out of. Was this really a dream she had, or something else? As she relaxed a bit, the next thing Chili could remember was planet Earth suspended in space in front of her. She was standing on some sort of observatory in space and watching the planet slowly orbit around the sun. Suddenly, several Earths appeared all around, as if space itself had become opaque, and she could see beyond the black abyss of it. And just beyond the opacity, she could see the vision of multiple Earths. The vision lasted for just a moment and then vanished, except for the original Earth in front of her. But as she looked at the planet, it appeared something was pulsating underneath its surface and trying to protrude out of it. The surface of the Earth looked like loose skin. The bulging object moved rapidly underneath the skin of the Earth in all directions, and grew bigger and bigger until finally it resembled a giant arachnid the size of a country crawling underneath the surface of Earth. Suddenly, more arachnid shapes appeared in different places underneath the layer of the Earth's crust. Without warning, they, too, started grotesquely moving around in all directions and overlapping each other. Horrified, Chili watched as they kept growing bigger and bigger until they were burrowing under the entire surface of the planet. In the dream, it looked like Earth was a giant blanket covering over a hive of bugs. Screaming in disgust, she looked away and suddenly found herself standing by the edge of a grass-covered landscape. In the far-off distance was a desert that looked like it stretched into eternity. Behind her was a large cobblestone wall that went on forever in both directions. The sky here was a pinkish ivory color. As Chili looked around in confusion, she saw a single white sunflower growing right by her feet. As she bent down to pick it up, she heard a rustling behind her. Turning around rapidly, she found herself staring right at several hideous black creatures that were shaped like slugs and giant beetle hybrids. Each was the size of a small house. They were horrifying and staring right down at her. Blaring in horror, she let out a loud wail before the foremost creature lunged at her as she finally woke up and found herself ending up here. But where was here? Too much thinking on unending dreams, she grunted to herself as she got up to her feet. Chili Sue was terrified, so maybe there was way more to reality than she had ever known. Either that or she was losing her mind. Or the world was ending. Then she remembered the image of the two portals in the sky above Buenos Aires. The world was ending. I'm not insane. But am I dead? Scared Chili said to herself. She was scared because rational Chili couldn't make sense of what was going on around her at all, and she was about to scream again. But then this is what you always wanted, she reminded herself. For a moment, her mind was a mix of everything. Rational Chili, scared Chili, you name it. But I can't make sense of any of this, she said again to herself. Brave Chili now. Where the hell are you, Dixie? Must I have to save you as well? She said out loud to no one in particular. She had to punch her leg several more times and leave 2 bruises on her arms before she was able to convince herself this really wasn't just another lucid dream. Apparently, she had full control of herself. It couldn't be a dream. Chili looked around. Okay, calm down, just think. This doesn't look so bad, she thought. All around her, she could see lush vegetation. It was majestic. Everywhere around her were bright green gardens and evergreen shrubs under a beautiful purple-pink dusk sky. There were birds, many birds, chirping and hidden from her sight. Behind her was a giant red rock face of cliffs. The cliffs went on forever in either direction and had vines growing on them most savagely. The rock wall seemed to meet up with a series of dark hills in the distance that were on either side of it. Combined with the vines hanging off them, the cliffs gave the appearance of a long waterfall of plant life pouring off the wall and causing rich green vegetation to spill down onto the countryside all around her. Far to her left was a large hedgerow that blocked the ground view from that direction. But the hills beyond were especially big, and they were silhouetted beautifully in front of the horizon. They looked inviting. Chili stared at the sky. It had a crisp feel to it. The air here smelled of mint and of fresh-cut grass. She could see the first faint stars coming out of the constellations above. See? She reasoned. This isn't so bad. And I'm betting I won't starve. There's got to be something edible around here. To the distant northeast, from where she stood, between deciduous forests and silhouetted against the darkening sky, she could see a titanic shape rising higher than all the surrounding hills. Judging by the shape of it, at least according to the bumper sticker logos scattered all over lampposts in the haunted house district, the shape exactly matched that of the ski mountain of Mount Mojadeo. There it was again! But then how in the world did I end up all the way over here? Thought Chili. The only other comforting thought was that with that mountain facing her right there, it was a good bet that somehow, inexplicably, she had found herself one way or another safely across to Anakaland, by means of some strange method she had no way of comprehending. So, evidently nightmares are the way to get into Anakaland. Lucid dreams, Chili Sue wondered to herself as she took a step forward and shook the cobwebs in her head. But still, how the hell is that possible? She wondered if Dixie was here somewhere, attempting the same quest she was now in. Maybe she'd bump into him. Provided I am in Anakaland, she reminded herself. Chili Sue decided that before she did anything else, she might as well try to see if all the experiences she had endured were mentioned somewhere in the trusted book she had in her bag. She found a nice bed of smooth rocks to recline on. Pulling out esoteric myths, Chili Sue searched diligently for any passages on safe passage to Anakaland. Nothing, really. Just the part she had read before. To get there, take the safer path through the clouds, avoid the great gravity door. But if you do not, hopefully you are strong enough to free fall to the other side, one of the passages was reading. Well, that's just it, she squealed. path through the clouds. But still, according to the chapter covering the myth about the Great Gravity Door, it appeared this so-called Great Gravity Door was one of many strange gateways interconnecting with this odd realm. In fact, all passages describing how to get here didn't sound rational at all. They were limbos of some sort. But the author of Esoteric Myths never gave a legitimate explanation for such phenomena. Chile knew full well that something didn't add up. She knew that geological reports about Anakaland stated that there was nothing up here besides rocks and dust. Yet here she was. She had, quote-unquote, walked through the clouds, just as the book described. How did that oracle statue thing know anything about Mayans, she wondered out loud. How is any of this possible? Wait, it doesn't even matter. Chile started walking towards the hills to her left. Her fears turned to wonder. Boy, she thought, as she finally discovered a way to pass through the hedgerows. If this really is Anakaland, it sure is lovely. Not anything like the horror stories they made it out to be. All she could think of was the beautiful endless green gardens and hills. Very beautiful, indeed. But if this ski mountain is really Muhadeu, then why the hell didn't I head home? But she already knew the answer. The daily grind. She knew in her heart she didn't want to yet. And she actually laughed. As she strolled through some gardens, her mind started to ponder. Do I really want to go back to that? Do I really want to save that? A tempting notion started forming in her head. And it wasn't the last time it would appear and cause her to question her decisions. Cutting through more countryside, Chile got into a debate with herself. Are the portals a good thing? Kick in the ass? But not everybody's life sucked, she thought. It's not all that bad. Some people are just trying to get by. And for others, there's no way things change so easily once one makes their bed, is there? Shouldn't something try to save them? At least the idea that she thought she knew the direction home gave her comfort. I just need to look around a little longer, she said with resolve. For the next 40 minutes, she meandered around the gardens with the carefree inquisitiveness of an animal, ever getting closer towards the hills. I need a better direction of where I'm going, she thought after a while. Or at least knowing what to expect. Immediately, her hand fumbled for esoteric myths again and a handful of berries from her supplies. It was a miracle nothing had fallen out of her bag. She discovered a nice pond nearby with another pile of smooth stones by its edge. Reclining on the appealing rocks, Chile closed her eyes and smiled. Despite the ludicrousness of all of this, she imagined herself by a poolside in paradise. She figured she could afford to not worry for a bit. After all I've been through, I've at least earned that, she thought. Like a relaxed tourist, she opened up the book and started munching on the quote-unquote gummy snacks she had found. She hastily flipped through a few of the pages again. The chapter covering the landscapes of Anakaland was too long to read through right then and there. It would take a few hours, and she knew she was going to need to find a safer dwelling sooner or later. So, she started skimming preface ahead.